Hey everyone, this is Paul Gale from paulgalenetwork.com, and thank you for joining me today for video game news. It is January 5th, 2021, and these are the top stories of the day. To kick things off, we've got some exciting news coming from Nintendo and Capcom today, and that is that Monster Hunter Rise will have its Monster Hunter digital event this Thursday, January 7th, 2021, at 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. This is really cool because Monster Hunter is a big deal. Monster Hunter Rise is coming out for Nintendo Switch this March. We know that the game is going to have a limited time access demo soon in January, potentially January 7th even. So this digital event coming in 2 more days is really exciting. January 7th also happens to be my half birthday mark. So yay, happy half birthday to me. That's pretty cool. I expect a nice presentation. Don't know how long it's going to be yet, but safe to say 10 to 20 minutes is likely. I will definitely be providing my feedback to that video in the coming days, so stay tuned. What are you expecting to see? What do you hope to see? Do you think we'll get a shadow drop demo right after the presentation? Hopefully. But I thought I'd share that today. I know some of you are probably very excited for this, as I am, so here's to Thursday. Next up today, this is something pretty cool, also from Nintendo. Nintendo announced today the acquisition of Next Level Games. They're a Canadian software developer that have had a really close relationship with Nintendo for many years now, but Nintendo didn't actually own them. Next Level Games did, however, create Luigi's Mansion 3, Mario Strikers. They worked on various games over the years, such as Punch-Out for Wii, and really have a good job, a good grasp, I should say, at maximizing Nintendo hardware, working very well with Nintendo's various IP. And by Nintendo now acquiring them, they will get to share the resources of Next Level Games and their talent and the technology that they have uncovered and worked on, and how to create certain games to help spread throughout Nintendo's other developers, other studios, and everybody could kind of work back and forth with one another and create bigger and better games. So what will Next Level Games work on next? We don't know. I would like to see them take on more Nintendo IP though, and I'm sure that that's going to happen in time, especially since this acquisition is now official. So good on Nintendo. We don't know what the cost was of this transaction, but I can't imagine that it was, a tremendously expensive one, like a Bethesda transaction, a several $billion move, and Sony acquiring Insomniac Games, for instance. This, if I had a guess, was within the 100 million or less territory, but we don't really have that information just yet. But solid news. I'm happy to see this, and I think it's a smart move. It kind of makes sense because they've had such a good working relationship that might as well just make it official and help better both, Next Level Games and Nintendo in what they could do going forward. So I thought I'd share that. Let me know what you're excited about seeing from them next. What IP do you want Next Level Games to do next? Moving along, in some Sony news. This isn't particularly good news, but it's not dire at the same time. That is that PlayStation, for the first time since 1994, when the original PlayStation launched in Japan, has not sold 1 million console units. You can see in this graph, in 1994, when PlayStation first entered the Japanese market, it was new, it didn't hit 1 million. But in 1995, it passed 1 million. And in 1996, it almost got to 3, and then so forth. It just has always stayed above this 1 million mark. At various times, you've had, selling 5 million, many times selling past 4, quite a few past 3, a lot past 2, and all but 2 passing 1. And that was in 1994 until now, 2020. Why is notable news to share? Because it hasn't happened in 26 years, but it's also not bad news necessarily. It's not doom and gloom going forward, although you do see this trajectory and you do see a downward slope. And if I move myself over here, you could better see what that looks like on the right side of the video. It's kind of like a wild stock market, right? Now, I wouldn't be too focused on this being the end of Sony in Japan, but there is a reason why. PS4 is a 7-year-old system, so naturally it's going to go down. The Japanese market gravitates typically towards handhelds, and with the PS Vita not being as successful as the PSP during this era, you could also see that Sony didn't have a second system selling well. It was just PS4. Nintendo Switch came on the scene and was, this polarizing console, so that ate into sales. And, if you look at 2017 through 2020, you're now dealing with an older system selling fewer and fewer consoles by default. Every system has its peak and then starts to go down. Nintendo Switch eating into sales. People buying fewer PS4s because they have the anticipation of the PS5. PS5 came out, so how come this isn't up here? How come this PS5 didn't bring it to that million territory? Sony has done an interesting thing in Japan where they definitely have their allocated shipments to North America and Europe and Australia, and then Japan. And in Japan, they really didn't ship that many in comparison to the rest of the world. It seems like Sony's mindset and marketplace of most important to them is the West, tackling that North American market, hitting the Hollywood crowd, being prominent in Europe where they are already successful and kind of always have been, making sure that they're strong in Australia and so forth. Yet you don't want to abandon Japan because a lot of video game developers come from Japan. Your Capcom, your Konami, your Square Enix. These developers are Japanese studios that make Japanese-centric games. Doesn't mean that everybody in the West and the rest of the world can't like it, but your Devil May Cries and your Monster Hunters and your Final Fantasies, those games, usually sell pretty well everywhere and make up a good percentage of their market in Japan. Look at Dragon Quest, for instance. It's huge out of Japan, right? So you don't want to not succeed in that market. But it's not going to do Sony some major damage worldwide if they don't succeed in Japan. But if they don't cater to their own home turf, those developers will flock eventually and make their exclusives on the system that is selling well, which is Nintendo Switch. If Nintendo continues, they will only eat further and further into Sony's sales, which I'm sure Nintendo certainly wouldn't mind. But if Sony's not careful with their marketing strategy and the type of games that they're trying to entice the Japanese market to buy, they're going to lose a lot of steam here. And the trickle effect will be fewer Japanese powerhouse games made for their system because these companies will know, my Resident Evil 8 will sell just fine in the United States and Europe, but not as much as it would have a generation or two ago because we're failing in Japan now. Now, maybe Sony really just doesn't care about the Japanese market, but I don't think that's the case. I'm not, saying that at all, but it's interesting to see that shift. Now they may surprise us, and this may be kind of a soft launch for the console in Japan, and maybe come March with Resident Evil Village or Final Fantasy 16 in 2021. That's when they release a lot of consoles. That's when they incentivize the system. But you could also look at some long-term implications, maybe that PS5 won't be as successful as PS4 or 3 or 2 before it. And maybe it will be Sony's weakest selling platform. Why? Well, you do have the console size. That is one thing to take into consideration. In addition to the Japanese market liking portables, typically favoring them more than home consoles, they also like their home consoles to be on the smaller size. They don't have as much space in their apartments, in their houses, in their entertainment centers. So a giant PS5 takes up more physical space. So that's working against Sony a little bit. However, at the end of the day, if you had awesome software, people aren't going to let, the size of a console not let you play, an amazing game. If you're really looking forward to Monster Hunter World 2 and it's only coming out on PS5 and you have that established Monster Hunter fan base in Japan, it's not going to be the difference of, I'm not going to buy a PS5, it's too big for me as a Japanese citizen. Now you're still going to buy it at that point. But in the meantime, if you don't have those heavy hitters, someone might be like, I don't think I need the system because I'm getting enough of an experience of new games on the Nintendo Switch. But I still think that, we're probably going to see a 1 million plus shipment of PlayStation 5 in 2021, but that all depends on, what's Sony doing behind the scenes? Are they going to ramp up production of the console there? Or are they going to really, stay focused and, deliver 85, 90% of their overall consoles that they have available to the West? Will they have more third-party partnerships? Will they have more acquisitions? Will they, fork out the dough to Capcom and say, hey, we want Street Fighter 6 exclusive on the PS5? I don't think the last one's going to be the case because the last time around it was a different story of Capcom seeking out, Microsoft, Sony, etc. But it's just an interesting thing. I like to look at numbers, as you know, with my weekly Famitsu charts, with my NPD charts, with charts that come out of the UK. So this is an interesting graph, and I got it from resetera.com. So thank you for presenting this data. And yeah, it's quite interesting to see. We don't know what the future is going to behold. You don't have to dominate Japan in order to win. But if you're a very distant third in Japan, it's difficult to get first place worldwide. But that's enough talk on that. I thought I would share it for now. And turning the table, like I said, I didn't want it to be just bad PlayStation news because this isn't necessarily bad. It's just interesting. It could potentially, be bad if it goes in that direction further. Like if in 2021 it still doesn't manage to sell 1 million, that's not that good. But anyhow, some good news on the PlayStation side, because I always like to try to be, as objective and open-ended in the stories that I share. And sometimes the short stories just are what they are, and that's why I'm reporting them, and sometimes giving my own take to deep dive. I gotta say this. Of all of the games that I think are on sale right now across any platform, on Nintendo Switch, on PlayStation 5, on Xbox Series X, I think the game of the moment, of the here and now, that I have to recommend the most, that's on sale, is Final Fantasy VII Remake. What a game. I played this at E3 2019 for the first time. One of the games of the show for me. It was between Final Fantasy VII Remake and Luigi's Mansion 3 that when I walked out of E3 2019, I was just blown away with how good they both were for two different reasons. And in 2020, Final Fantasy VII Remake was one of my best games of the year. Now, however, between 2020, when this game came out in April, and come Black Friday, Christmas time, my TV was upgraded. I went from a 60-inch LED to a 65-inch OLED from LG, the CX10. And the viewing experience and playing this game, formerly on a PS4 and now on my PlayStation 5, I'm playing at the optimum settings. I'm playing on a PS5, which is, to a better degree of performance than a PS4 Pro. I'm playing on a bigger TV. I'm playing with a backlight setup that I have on my TVs now, with LED strips in the back, able to match the colors to what the mood is of the product I'm playing, the game, the movie that I'm watching, etc. And that OLED display is sharp. And of course, the fact that it's a 4K instead of 1080p just makes it that much more impressive visually. So I'm having a good time going back and playing games, God of War, Horizon, and Final Fantasy VII Remake. And, there's a big sale, and I mentioned the sale before on the PlayStation network of lots of games that you could get for dirt cheap. Horizon, by the way, is one of them. It's only $10 right now, and that's worth checking out if you haven't already. But there's a lot new stuff too. You know, um, Ghost of Tsushima, Crash 4. So I mentioned that before, so you can check it out if you missed that previous video. But uh, replaying this now on my new TV, setting my background light to this color right here, this bluish green color, the color that you see, synonymous with Midgar, synonymous with, the Mako flowing through the reactors and stuff like that. This color that's been so strong with the series, strong with FF7 for the last 23 years. That's what you think. When you think FF7, you think Midgar. You can't avoid it. It's the stage in Super Smash Brothers, the first Final Fantasy stage. And I'm taken back all over again. I'm loving the experience. I already spoke about it several times throughout 2020 of how much I love the game, but right now I think is as good a time as any to give a little bit more of a deep dive take on it. If you've never played the original, and if you haven't been spoiled too much about what happened in the game, this is something that you're going to love. It takes a really nice story and just blows it up. It magnifies it so much. It takes these awesome characters and gives them so much more depth, so much more backstory, so many lines of dialogue, really rich dialogue provided by really good quality voice actors, nice facial features. Final Fantasy, ever since it hit FF7 on PS1, one of the things that the series has been known for is these dynamic FMVs. At the time, they were full motion videos, and now we're getting basically real-time engine, a little bit sharpened up, and a better presentation in terms of dynamic camera angles and whatnot to tell these cinematic little movies in the game. But it's such a beautiful experience that you're watching a movie unfold, the camera wraps around, and then you're right into that gameplay. It doesn't take you out of the experience. Back in the day, it was a treat, but it always kind of took you out of the experience a little bit. But I didn't mind it because that's the way it was at the time. FF7, you played it on PlayStation. You played in these, really pretty pre-rendered backgrounds. You were very simple polygon characters walking through, and you played the game, and that's what it was. At the time, it looked good, not breathtaking. If you compared it to like what else was that in 1997, GoldenEye came out in 1997. Star Fox 64 came out in 1997. So from a polygon to polygon comparison, FF7 wasn't there in terms of models, but the pre-rendered backgrounds made up for it. And then the special thing was when it came to these musical scores that the CD allowed, and really the FMVs, these awesome movies that didn't look like anything that you saw before on the Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis. They weren't sprites, they weren't big drawings, they were early polygon movies, right? In a time where you didn't see a ton of Toy Stories popping up everywhere. There wasn't a ton of CGI films or CGI cartoons, so it was rare. And Squaresoft at the time, before they merged with Enix to become Square Enix, at the time their mastery is really what set them apart from different developers. Going into Final Fantasy VIII, you'll never forget Squall and the dance sequence from that game. And going into 9 and 10, they did just that one more thing. It was the first voice acting RPG of a Final Fantasy series. And at that point, watching Yuna in the water, watching Titus laugh, maybe not the laughing part, but watching that game and the level of quality of FMV that it brought and voice acting to complement it, they really became masters of storytelling. And different people, like different Final Fantasies for different stories. I think Final Fantasy VI is one of the best stories. That might be my overall favorite story. But 10 I loved. 7 I loved back then. 8 I enjoyed quite a bit. I liked 4. 4 being 2 depending, because they technically went 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, but I just call it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But anyways, long-standing series, a few decades old, but they got to the point, Square Enix, where this game is that proper combination of this is what a Final Fantasy should be, in my opinion. It's not as big and open-ended of a world as 15, which on its own is still a very solid game and looks great, but this is still a big world. It takes, original story, blows it up, and just the presentation is exquisite. You play the game and it's not like you're sacrificing, the cutscene isn't as good as it should be because they're doing real time. And actually, I want that breathtaking FMV. I want that breathtaking, the system can't handle this type of power. I want to see something better. I want to see that top level CGI. I actually feel like when I'm playing this game and I'm experiencing the cinema scenes, the movie sequences, I'm not taken out of the experience. I'm not feeling like, I wish it was more. It's just fantastic. The level of depth and complexity, the animation. I'm gushing over the game right now, which it feels good because it's something that I really wanted to share that, right now we have new viewers that probably didn't hear my original reaction to this game over the last, several months or different videos in 2020. So if you're watching this now, if you haven't played the game, definitely pick it up. If you have played the original, you're in for a surprise. It's a lot deeper than it was then. Not to give away too many spoilers, but you could get to a simple section in the original Final Fantasy VII, climb a tower, fight a boss, get out of a tower, fight another boss, and leave. And you can do that in a span of like 20 minutes. In this game, the size and scope is really shown of what the developers originally had in mind, because the journey to get to the tower is elaborate. The tower itself is another grand experience. The battle up the tower pays tribute to the original, certain voice lines, certain camera angles that are still there, certain flashback scenes still show up. Like I said, lines of dialogue, costumes, certain enemies, bosses, making sense out of certain things that back then you kind of had to use your imagination, look at art books and be like, that's what they were going for with these kind of rudimentary polygons, but that's a cool character, that's a cool enemy, and now whoa, this looks breathtaking. Then you make the way to the tower, then you fight the boss, then there's another, chamber of events, and, it looks so good, but I gotta say, it truly is the best remake I've ever played of a game. This is an experience that, it's not just repainting of an old game, it's not just up-resing it, it's not just adding in a couple of things or enhancing the size and scope a little bit. This is taking a classic and giving so much attention to detail and paying so much respect to that classic that did so much for video games and so much for the RPG genre, and just magnifying it up in every area, and not just filler, but good quality content. It's such a breathtaking game. And I love it. One of my top picks for 2020, like I said, plenty of times over. And that whole experience, that whole thing that I mentioned, what could be 20 minutes before, is like an 8-hour ride now. And you're like, how do they take a 20 minutes and turn it into an 8-hour experience of that same chunk that you explained? Trust me, you'll see. If you've played it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't played it, would I recommend you playing the original first or this first? Honestly, if you don't have any spoilers in your mind, if you don't know anything of the original, I would say play this remake first. Let your first experience with the game and the story and the characters be in this really high fidelity take of the title, and then go back and pick up Final Fantasy VII Remake on the Nintendo Switch eShop or Xbox or PlayStation 5 and play the original then, and then be like, oh wow, that's what they did with this original? That's insane. If you have already been spoiled but haven't played the game, you know the general gist of all of it, who dies, who doesn't die, certain chain of events, but just never played it, then maybe I would say, okay, play the original and then play the remake. So, depending on who you are, I guess there's different ways you could go about it. Whew, that was a lot of talk on Final Fantasy VII Remake. I wasn't sure I would say that much, but since it is 50% off now, and this sale is ending in a couple of days, definitely check it out. I hope that this game also gets optimized even further for PS5. If that happens, I will let you know. But that's my pick of the here and now of what you should be playing in January 2021 if you haven't already played this one, because of everything on sale on all of the consoles. This half off deal for this game in particular is quite a steal. And I will say one more thing. This game is actually going to be even bigger in the long run, because this FF7 remake isn't a remake of the original game in its entirety. This is just a portion of that. There will be a remake part 2, maybe a remake part 3. It'll take a couple of discs or downloads or what have you to tell the final story of this is Final Fantasy VII broken into a few sections to fully remake the original's concept. So that will be interesting to see what comes next and when we get it, because they're taking their time. They don't want to take too much time, but they're really pouring in a lot. You play the game and you're just watching the scene over and over again. Everything is really precisely done, and bravo on selling 6 million units approximately as of January 5th, 2021. Soon, I expect, come April, it will also be available on Xbox One, maybe Nintendo Switch, PC. So if you only have a PlayStation 4 or 5 and you don't have the game already, check it out. If you have one of the other consoles and you're kind of hanging out and being like, should I just wait till April to maybe buy it on another system because you don't have a PlayStation, or you have, all the platforms and you're just not sure where you want to experience it? You could, I suppose, wait till April to see, because Sony does have an exclusive 1-year contract with Square Enix for this game to only be on PS4/PS5. And after that, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but it's probably safe to imagine that it's going to come to other platforms. So that remains to be seen. But if it doesn't, hey, like I said, you can't argue with paying $30 for what's truly a masterpiece. Okay, and moving on. The last news of the day, it's going back into Nintendo territory. Nintendo, if you go to super-nintendo-world.usj.co.jp, and then you could do /en/us/home for the English portion, you got this really nice look at Super Nintendo World, and you could work your way through the website. There's a lot to look at. I don't want to spoil it all for you, but definitely check it out. You can watch different videos of different presentations that they've had over the last couple of years. We learned some things about the Mario Kart ride. We learned the approximate length of it being around 5 minutes long. See right here, it tells you how many people per car, 4, 2 per row, 2 rows total, gives you the height requirements and all that. We get pictures, we get a look at bands, look at shops. You could click on everything. You could go next and go on a ride with Yoshi, and you get to see a little bit of the Yoshi ride and learn some of it. Like, this is all new. We haven't seen this angle from, actual people riding on here. staged actors or real expressions or not, whatever it is. Pretty cool. Happy to see, presumably, a mother and son on a ride. Like I said, I'm not going to spoil everything and read it all to you, but I recommend going to the site. Once again, supernintendoworld.usj.co.jp. And here's another ride, approximately 5-minute ride. So that's a pretty beefy ride. I imagine that the lines are going to be pretty long for Mario Kart and for Yoshi. So having a 5-minute ride on each, that's pretty nice. You got Captain Toad and 3 mysterious eggs, a map to go around. As you keep clicking, you just keep learning more and more. We had Bowser Jr. right there that I clicked on, and we have the whole land is your playground. Explore the world of Mario in real life. Going into the interactive parts of it, immerse yourself in interactive play. Like I said, there's a lot to see. There's a talk of bands, showing off the different bands, the different colors, how it connects with the app, different challenges. There's something on the tickets that you could look and see what the ticket situation is like, how much it costs. Now, it was my original intention to go to Super Nintendo World when it was going to originally open somewhere around July 7th, 2020. Obviously, that didn't happen, but I thought that would be a fantastic way to celebrate my 37th birthday in Japan with this park. Look at all these food items. That's awesome. And now that we actually have, boy, that's cool. I want to try everything. This looks really good. Now that we have a new release date of February 4th, it's one of those things where I would really like to go. It's, a day shy of a month away. And, Nintendo means a lot to me. Nintendo is my childhood, my teenage years, my early 20s, my adulthood, now being a dad of 2 and getting to share this nostalgia and so many of these beloved characters and franchises with my kids. It's awesome. I would love to go. I don't know at this point, will I be able to make it to the February 4th premiere or not. I will certainly go at some point, living 20 miles away from Universal Studios Hollywood. That's a location that I will be frequently visiting, when the world becomes a safer place and flight and international travel makes more sense. I'd love to go to the Japanese park. I'd love to go to the park in Asia and in Orlando, Florida. So will I go there February 4th? To be on the safe side, I would say probably not, sadly. Would I go to Japan, later in 2021? If the world's safer and health guidelines are put and things resume back to a, comfortable normal, I would say absolutely. I'd love to go sometime this year to Super Nintendo World because we're probably not going to get the park in North America until 2022 is the guess that I have, because everything also got delayed a little bit. Hollywood's got to be delayed by a bit, Orlando's got to be delayed by a bit, but they're still happening, so it's pretty exciting. So I'll be there in time. Yeah, let me know what you thought of today's video game news. Some of my video game news days are on the shorter side, and they're just hitting the news stories. Sometimes they're diving into video game talk territory, like today with Final Fantasy, kind of deep diving into that. So let me know what you think. Super Nintendo World, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Monster Hunter Rise. Are you excited for that? Sound off in the comments. As always, I appreciate reading them, interacting with you. Thank you for your time. This is Paul Gale Network signing out, and I will see you next time for more video game news. Take it easy. Bye.